Good afternoon, folks. I appreciate the opportunity to present you with some personal experiences that have led me to some research concerning the role of leadership in management. This in turn has led me to some conclusions that I believe are very important in the practice of our profession. Ask yourself this question: is there a difference between a leader and a manager? Well, that might seem to be a somewhat lighthearted question. It must be thought about very carefully. Some may say that they mean one and the same thing when talking about management. That thought may imply that every manager automatically has leadership skills when in taking over a particular job or a team. However, in my view, that's not always the case. In order to answer this question, one should search out the definition of each and not merely to assume that they are one and the same. In thought of in military terms, the upper ranks are your leaders, and there are no doubt about that among the lower ranks. Get that truth confused rather, and as a lower rank member, you may find yourself in deep trouble. One merely has to recognize that there are plenty of recent examples of what can happen in the armed forces and what subordinates can or cannot do. The very upper ranks, it seemed in the past, are able to do whatever it was that they wanted. And hopefully, as we know, that may be in the past soon. So is there any comparison between military life and business life? Well, certainly there are some similarities, but the goals and objectives are vastly different. In the military, protection of the country is the goal, and the actions taken toward that goal must be under the strict obedience of orders from the generals, and that must filter on down to the lower ranks. However, in business, as most of you may know, the growth and the profitability of the firm and the success of the firm is of paramount importance. And that is wholly dependent on the success of the division, the department, and the team. And today we're going to concentrate a little bit more on the team. But in short, everyone must buy into the goals and the objectives of the business. One dictionary describes the manager in the following way, and let me read this. A person who has control or direction of an institution, business, etc., or a part, division, or phase of it. This is the person that has been appointed to this position by upper management and to whom the responsibility of success of the goals and objectives is vested. Now, one may assume that the manager will have the tools on hand to assist him or her to be able to satisfy the goals and objectives that have been placed on them by his or her manager. These tools may range between computer programs and the talents of the people on the team. In the following two sections of this presentation, I will attempt to compare the roles of management and leadership, and hopefully demonstrate to you the desirability of leadership in management. Okay, so now I've introduced the word people. The word is one of the most important words when attempting to describe the impact of manager and leader. I'd like you to extrapolate that word to mean staff, senior staff, junior staff, professional staff, and non-professional staff. This might describe your team, perhaps. You know how it works. Work hard, get noticed, get a raise, get a promotion, and rise up your ladder. You will hear me refer to ladder many times during this next part of the talk. So how do these personal goals, your goals, impact on your work for the management of your team or staff, that is. As a project manager or a senior manager, you set goals for the team. They agree to the goals. You demand more. They produce, and everyone is happy. You're a great manager if that's the case. However, if you set higher and more productive goals, and your team fails to meet those goals or falls short of those goals, both you and your manager are not happy. Leadership may help you accomplish more growth for your team and for your firm as an entity. Let me talk about leadership now. And I'm just going to move there we go. In the previous portions of this lesson, I've concentrated more on management. But I would like now to concentrate on and getting you thinking about the term and the philosophy of leadership. Allow me to get you thinking about that important part of the manager-leader discussion by offering you a definition of the word leader. The Webster Dictionary defines the word as follows, and I'll read it again. In political terms, as the leader of a political party. In musical terms, as the conductor of an orchestra. And in business terms, as the person who tells people, and especially workers, what to do. The team leader is good at making sure that everyone keeps busy at their assigned tasks. Now allow me, if you don't mind, to repeat one phrase of that definition. The person who tells people, and especially workers, what to do. So if you're a manager or a leader of a department, you must tell people what to do, according to Webster. I offer that leadership is much more than telling people what to do. I think telling people what to do sounds somewhat dogmatic, does it not? The following is a statement that I've used for many years in my career to describe the relationship between manager and leader. And I quote, "The firm may appoint you the manager, but only your team can make you the leader." I don't know whether that statement is one that I read, whether I heard it somewhere, or whether I even just made it up. But I think that I fervently believe and I subscribe to it. I think that a manager who is also a leader does not tell you what to do. Rather, the leader in him is or her guides you toward the goals that have been set for the team. These goals may have been sent down from the executive, but it is the responsibility of your manager to meet those goals. Let me cite a personal example that will help you to understand where I'm going with this. At the retirement of the president of a national firm for which I worked for many years, most of which were the years when this man worked in our Ottawa office, the chief executive officer stated in his final speech during this man's retirement party, quote, "Bill did not build great employees. He built great leaders." That statement made me realize that leadership was not only valuable to that CEO, but also valuable to the firm, of which he was in fact the leader. But let me say that Bill was truly a great leader. During previous meetings with me to review my role as the manager of the transportation division, this same CEO always referred to leadership skills, and not once did he ever mention managerial skills. I vividly remember one statement that he made to me. "You are leading a good team." And I think that leadership to him was of paramount importance. His statement was made quite early in my tenure as a department manager. I did not realize it then, but it started me on the track of recognizing the role of leadership and determining how to develop better leadership skills in myself. After the first 2 months of being a department manager, the CEO asked me to state my priorities for my role with the firm. I told him that, with some intrepidation, that he may not agree with my order of the priorities. I told him that my priorities were, in this order: 1, the staff; 2, the clients, because it was a consulting firm; and 3rd, the firm. He looked at me with some question in his eyes, and he asked me why I would categorize my priorities in that way. And I explained to him in the following manner: if we do not have a great and successful team, in other words, staff, we will not have those satisfied clients that we're looking for. And then we will not have a thriving firm. He told me that this was a novel approach, and he hadn't thought of it in that manner before. He did not disagree, and he encouraged me to continue to use that approach. That was a positive example. Now I want to give you a negative example, because for every positive there are some negatives. I was the manager of a branch office of a prominent Western Canadian firm that had been recently bought by an American firm. One of the first actions by that company was to appoint a vice president who came from another subsidiary firm in Ontario. And let me say, bringing someone in Ontario to manage a firm in Alberta was a big mistake. Alberta does not like Ontario. Anyway, the vice president used to have a management meeting every 2 weeks, and those of us who were managers of outlying offices phoned in by conference call. And these other offices were in Red Deer, in Edmonton, and the office I managed was in Lethbridge. This particular meeting started out with a loud noise. And apparently, I had found out afterwards, the vice president walked into the room, slammed his managerial notes or files, whatever, on the boardroom table, and said forcefully, and I quote, "Head office is angry about our indices, and I'm going to start firing you people before I get fired." You could have heard a pin drop, even over the telephone. He went on by criticizing managers quite severely. I hung up. So who was the better leader? Bill, in my previous example, or this vice president? Do you get better results through threats like this, or developing a plan to change course that every manager can buy into? Would it have been better to ask for the input of each person at the meeting so as to develop a plan to go forward? Let me state the obvious, that the call I got from the VP later that day did not go well. I criticized his actions, and he told me that I should not tell him how to do his job. I told him that his management skills weren't the best, and then I told him that I was resigning. And I guess I should also say that when I did resign, I was followed by 5 other senior engineers in that Calgary office who wanted to make sure that they moved away from that particular situation. About a month later, this vice president was replaced. This example caused me to develop a bit of a leadership mantra, if you will. I call it my 4 C's. It is stated in this particular manner, and I'm going to hold my fingers up in front of me where you can see the four C's, and I usually point to each finger and say, communication and cooperation avoids confusion and consternation. I have found that this works very well when dealing in teams, particularly dealing with contractors, but it also applies to working as a firm. Perhaps the vice president in the past example should have used that earlier. So let's move to some unrelated and less personal examples. I don't want to tell you my whole life. Pat Williams was a senior vice president of the Orlando Magic, and many of you know that's a basketball team in the NBA. And he had found that basketball team in 1987. But since 2010, he has spoken extensively about the role of leadership in the success of his basketball team. He has developed what he calls his 7 keys to leadership. That, in my way of thinking, best describes the attributes which a manager must strive to achieve. Change the screen. There we go. And I'll change it again. So Mr. Williams' 7 keys says, see a vision, be a communicator, build good people skills, build good character, build competence, be bold, and be a servant. Notice he's not talking about the team, he's talking about the manager, the leader. You do not see anything in these 7 keys that remotely resembles you got to tell people what to do. Mr. Williams' vision, talking about that first, deals with making a plan that is both clear and simple. He advises to see a vision that is powerful and easy to imagine, and a vision that focuses on change as a communicator. Williams wants us to be organized. He wants us to keep things simple and to relax in our approach. Williams thinks that building good people skills includes the partnering of authority with being a good team leader. In terms of character, Williams prizes values, principles, and good morals. He wrote, and I quote, to build competence in others requires knowledge, experience, and confidence in order to engage your team. To engage your team, he writes, you must be bold and demonstrate that you have done your homework, that you can plan ahead, and that you can be decisive. And perhaps the most important key to developing the next leaders is that you have to be a servant to them, and that you must give up the need to control, and to remember, this is not about you, but it is about others and about the goals of the team. In my review of his 7 keys, the first 5, vision, communication, good people skills, good character, and competence, those are the ones that allow you to complete the last 2, being bold and being a servant. Being bold and making sure that leadership is about your team and not about you. Another author on this subject, Daniel Goldman, in his book entitled Primal Leadership, states that you need emotional intelligence to accomplish your goals in leadership. He has developed 5 components of emotional development to lead his followers towards their goal. In his 5 emotional intelligence components are self-awareness, self-regulation, internal motivation, empathy, and social skills. Let us now look at those 5 components and see how they might apply to us. Self-awareness. Goldman describes this as the ability to recognize and understand your personal moods and emotions and drives, as well as the effect that those have on others. He states that the hallmarks of self-awareness include self-confidence, realistic self-assessment, and a self-depreciating sense of humor. In other words, you got to be able to make fun of yourself in order to make a point, if that needs to be done. Self-awareness depends on one's ability to monitor one's own emotional state and to correctly identify and name one's emotion. I will say that this is not evident in my previous last direct example. Self-regulation, says Goldman, is the ability to control or redirect disruptive impulses and moods, and the propensity to suspend judgment and to think before acting. In other words, allow the people on your team to speak their mind without fear of being put down or embarrassed. These hallmarks include trustworthiness and integrity, comfort with ambiguity, and openness to change. Remember, change is a constant, and the ability to control the rate of change as it applies to your team is a definite plus. Goldman describes internal motivation as a passion to work for internal reasons that go beyond money and status, which he states are only external rewards. These internal reasons include an inner vision that is important to life, a joy in doing something, a curiosity in learning, and a propensity to pursue goals and energy in persistence. Hallmarks for this include a strong drive to achieve, optimism, even in the face of some failure, and organizational commitment. As a leader, you will want your team to maintain these attributes. Goldman states that empathy is the ability to understand the emotional makeup of other people, a skill in treating people according to their emotional reactions. Hallmarks include expertise in building and retaining talent. Remember, retaining talent, cross-cultural sensitivity, and service to clients and customers. It is important to note that empathy does not necessarily imply complete compassion. Goldman suggests that social skills that we develop include a proficiency in managing relationships and building networks, and an ability to find common ground and build support. Hallmarks of the skills described here would include the ability to bring your team to a common point of agreement in the plan, and then the commitment to work together to accomplish the overall goal. Again, get the team to agree and do not tell them what to do. I would highly recommend that you obtain a copy of Daniel Goleman's book or look it up online. And if you want to see some more of his theories of emotional intelligence. Now, I noticed that a lot of folks have perhaps asked questions, and I'm going to look at some of those questions right now and see if there are any that we would wish to answer. And I'm looking. I noticed that Neil McPherson has indicated that his personal definition of leadership is to lead by example, and I totally agree with that. So, however, let's move again, perhaps to our paper and get on to some other things that we want to talk about here. I will certainly have time at the end of the paper, end of our time, for some questions, approximately about 15 minutes or so, if you wish to do that then. So moving on, I want to talk now about the promotion of managers. Let us now turn to this very important situation that happens as a manager. Some of you are not yet managers. And what's going to happen as you become a project manager, which may be the first thing that you might want to do, you have to promote the people under you as well. And if you are already senior managers, you're going to be looking to promote people from that first group into project manager or department manager and that sort of thing. So anyway, we're going to move into some of the discussion there. And this might be more directed to our colleagues that are already senior managers, but it also applies to those of you who are looking to get there. Let me ask you a question that is only meant to get you thinking and to set the tone for where I'm going with my line of thought. When you are promoting someone to a higher position, do you promote on the basis of seniority, or do you promote due to demonstrated experience and leadership skills? If the former is the prime reason, do you consider leadership skills at all in your decision? The author mentioned above, Daniel Goleman, in his Harvard Business Review article entitled, "What Makes a Leader?" asks the question in this manner. Let me read it for you. Every business person knows a story about a highly intelligent, highly skilled person who was promoted into a leadership position only to fail at the job. And they also know a story about someone with solid, but not necessarily extraordinary intellectual abilities and technical skills, who was promoted into a similar position and then soared into the future. I ask you to search your memory to determine if this anecdote can apply to the decisions that were made in your firm or where you were employed at one time in your career. It sure applied to cases in my experience, which I will detail later. How can this happen? Or perhaps better put, why does this happen? Let's delve into those questions a little bit. In every firm, regardless of what might be the business of the firm, there are employees with Goldman's solid but not extraordinary intellectual abilities and technical skills. They are anxiously waiting for the chance to soar to the next rung of their personal ladder of success. For the purposes of this talk and to make a point, let me say that there are two people of this same skill in your firm who are in line for the long sought after promotion. Only one of them is more senior to the firm than the other. Now this is where your skill as a manager for the firm comes into play. Do you promote on the basis of seniority, or do you delve into the skills of each so as to promote the best candidate? Do you promote on the basis of the fact that the senior person is asking or perhaps even demanding the promotion, while the other is quietly going about his or her job hoping to get noticed? I will not deny that there are inherent risks in this situation. You may lose an employee if you make either decision. This is the damned if you do and damned if you don't, you might say. Allow me to cite a personal example of this dilemma that faced a manager of mine at the first firm for which I worked after graduation from Tech. A friend of mine, a competent engineer who had graduated with me at Tech, had been needling his manager to get a promotion to the next level of management. He and I were doing the same job, but for different managers, and seemingly we were both doing it well. However, I was under the impression that the reason for promoting would not be because I was asking for it, but rather it might be because one of us was doing the job better or had better skills. There was indeed a promotion, and my friend got the position. I had sat back in the knowledge that I had just completed a project for the firm that had resulted in public accolades for the firm and had, in addition, saved the firm an awful lot of capital money on that project. I thought that this would be taken into account and that I would be in the running, so to speak, for a promotion. I was disappointed, not for me, happy for my friend, but disappointed for me. And I started the process over the next few months, perhaps, of thinking that I want to look for a new job. But of course, I didn't tell anybody at the firm. And I succeeded in that goal of getting another job and an offer, and I gave my notice. As was the practice at that firm, I was asked to participate in what was called an exit interview, not with my manager, but with his manager, a third level. I guess this was supposed to allow me to speak openly as to whether or not there was a problem with my direct manager. I was asked to go to lunch to make this a less formal process. And this third manager told me that I was a valuable employee and that he was greatly disappointed that I was leaving. And I knew this gentleman from the office. He then asked me why I decided that I wanted to leave. I told him the story about the promotion and further advised him that I did not want to work for a firm that promoted people merely because they complained about not being promoted. He was shocked at my answer. He called it insightful and asked me to stay. He told me that he would see to it that I would be promoted. I told him that I think that might be for the wrong reason and that I stayed the course toward accepting the new position. Now, was I the right person to have received the promotion? Perhaps not. Maybe it wasn't my turn. Was my friend the right person to have been promoted? Yes, I think he was. And he went on to a successful career. But it got me thinking. It really did. Here was a case where an employee who felt that he was ignored moved on. That was me. A further example in very short form was my offer of a promotion and a transfer for which I had applied to a different department within the City of Ottawa engineering department where I worked. My direct manager refused to allow the promotion and of course the sizable raise in pay because he said that he needed me in his department. Now for those of you who think that was an awful thing, back in the day, that was probably a reason why some people did not get the chance to move ahead. But happily, it doesn't seem to happen much anymore. So a month later, I left that organization and moved back to Nova Scotia. And that manager lost me anyway. I swore to myself following that I would never stand in the way of an employee or a team member of mine who wanted to move, to help his career. I would never stop them to do that. Is this not what the canons of ethics of the calling of an engineer states? Leadership dictates, and the canons of ethics alludes that you as a manager should encourage each of your team members to get to the next rung on their success ladder. It's your job. Take somebody, move them up to that next rung as soon as they're ready for it. But beware, because at some point on that ladder, that next rung is not going to exist. because that person does not have the skill or the ability to move up to a rung that's not there. It's a long fall. It's called failure. All of us have seen, perhaps, similar circumstances in our careers. You who are younger engineers attending today will be promoted at some point in time. And I want you to work hard to be promoted for the right reason. Moving now to the topic of training. I just didn't do something there. Anyway, I'm going to move on to training. I want to ask you a question concerning the training of employers within a firm. How many of you have been offered internal or even external training toward becoming project managers or senior managers, etc.? Some firms, particularly larger firms, have a program where young engineers and young managers, or whatever your profession is, will be provided internal training, probably online from their HR department. This is a good practice, and it is one that will produce results. And I have gone through that sort of thing. Now, speaking to the senior managers, how many of you offer leadership and advanced management training to your department or your team managers? Do you believe that once an engineer is promoted to a higher management position, you don't have to train that person any longer? Do you believe that manager is then on his or her own regarding development of his or her skills? There's no doubt in my mind that there are programs that we can make ourselves aware of online or at university or college that will help us to be new managers. But I want managers in the firm to provide leadership in training to their underlings. Leadership and management training is an investment in your career, or it's an investment in your firm if you are a senior manager. As a senior manager, perhaps you believe that an engineer should be appointed to the level of project manager when that person has merely gained engineering experience. However, project managers must have the ability to display leadership skills to their project team in order to build a solid plan for the project design and to be able to perform varying roles within the team structure. Think of important project attributes such as schedule, budget control, client relationship, and promotion of the firm. I offer that those 4 roles in particular are areas in which training is vital. Certainly the leadership skill to be able to communicate these very important project controls to the team is valuable and part of the team development. I'm going to look again to see if there are any questions that I can answer there. And I see lots of people on. I appreciate that that's the case. And I see Julian has asked the question that, in my opinion, what is the main impact of remote work in management of engineering? Are there any anecdotes? Let me say that it's a challenge. You're working from home, you're working from your bedroom or your dining room or whatever. It's a challenge. And I do trust that it's not going to be one that's going to interfere with your moving up into roles of project management. But it is something to be concerned about. And Jillian, I just want to indicate that these times that we're in are going to perhaps change at some point in time. I really hope they do. And I think we'll get back to something that we quite understand. And I think you're going to find that if not, then there's going to be a way that senior management is going to be able to do things to bring you and others like you up to another management level. What I want to do now is move ahead to something that is completely in my idea that I want to explain some other leadership here. And it's called the Advances in Engineering Leadership. So it is a different path from what I've been talking about, because what I've been talking about is the personal situation. But this would be the subject of developing engineering leadership in young engineers for the betterment of industry as an entity. There are a number of new studies that are cited by the American Society for Engineering and Engineering Education. In particular, a study that was authored in Calgary by three people, Robin Paul, Dr. Arindam Sen, and Emily Watt, was written in 2018. This study demonstrated the demand for engineering graduates with stronger leadership skills and has resulted in many engineering leadership development programs around the world. These programs are out there for your inspection, and it applies to your team leaders. So what I can say is expand your horizons, colleagues. The results of the above study involved 163 participants who were asked how they would define engineering leadership, and it resulted in 4 distinct themes. These themes are, and I'll put them on the screen for you: lead and influence others, personal effectiveness, engineering competency, and collaboration. In terms of lead and influence others, here again we see the quality of leadership being brought to the fore. I'm not going to repeat the previous qualities that we have discussed at length here, but I want to once again emphasize them. Personal effectiveness. This theme encourages younger engineers to strive to make a difference in the industry. Look for better ways to do your job. Examine the effectiveness of your team plan, and establish and develop your goals and admiration while keeping the goals of your firm in mind. Remember, there are leadership courses and management courses that you can take at your local college or university. Colleagues, we've all strived to make ourselves better at what we do. We have sworn to the canons of ethics, and we are aware that the Engineering Act states that we must be responsible, even in a legal manner, for what we do. Engineering competency is a hallmark of our profession, and all of us must strive to be personally competent. Collaboration. To my mind, I believe that each of us is a member of a team of engineers. To be successful in creating engineering leadership in the world, we are required to work together. Back in history, for those of you who may not know, there were only 2 branches of engineering: civil engineering and military engineering. Obviously, the civil category has expanded immensely to encompass newer categories such as electrical, structural, mechanical, and industrial to enable the world to grow. Those were the only 5 or 6 that were in play when I went to Nova Scotia Technical College way back many years ago. But you know what? An awful lot of those have expanded immensely to encompass newer categories. And they're just changing all of the time. And it takes collaboration among us to allow and to in fact make that happen. Based on these results, the authors of the paper I mentioned above propose a definition of engineering leadership that highlights the importance of both engineering and leadership aspects, thereby providing a clearer direction for fostering leadership skills in our future engineers. The attributes of leadership have also been included in the new student outcomes for the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, and these became effective in 2019-2020. Students must be able to, and I quote, function effectively on a team whose members together provide leadership, create a collaborative and inclusive environment, establish goals, plan tasks, and meet objectives. Once again, you see the word leadership being used as a necessary skill set. For the purpose of this paper, for our purposes of their paper, there is an understanding that there is some amount of overlap between management and leadership. However, the focus on the paper was on leadership. Colleagues, I offer that the leadership is a skill that is very necessary to the success of young engineers, senior engineers, and senior managers of engineering firms. Without a demonstration of good leadership, engineers who appreciate being a member of a thriving firm, a team where they can be led toward success, may eventually seek that success elsewhere. I stress to you that creating competent leadership skills in our engineers is necessary for the future development of our profession. That's my paper, and I thank you for allowing me to present this paper here today. And I suppose to be able to sound off a little, or perhaps a lot, regarding my thinking and my thoughts towards leadership. Remember, leadership skills are important. Thank you again. So I guess we have some time for questions, if there are any. Let me go down. Have I ever promoted one of my direct reports and had them fail? Unfortunately, yes. And that's why I had that part of my presentation which was produced. Yes, I did. I had somebody I brought in, and within a very short period of time, in fact, within the, what would I call it, the probation time, that person failed and unfortunately didn't make it through. But I did have one. Now I get okay. Most people are just providing me with padding for my ego. And thank you very much for doing that. As you can tell, I've been an engineer since 1970, and I've been there, done that, failed at that, did better at that, and I hope that what I've done today here is to give you folks some of that experience. And I've always said, you learn more by making mistakes than you do from your successes. But what you've got to do is learn more from the mistakes of others, senior people like me, in order for you to succeed.